This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, we'll call to order the Monterey Select Board on January 30th at 6 p.m. We have all members present here in Town Hall. And the first item of business is the budget.
I didn't print it off because I ended up having a couple changes.
Yeah. I can pull it up. I don't know if there's anywhere in particular we want to start, Melissa.
I didn't bring my computer.
You gotta start bringing your computer. This happens every week.
Does anybody else need a printed copy?
I'll take one if you're gonna do it, just to the main page, it doesn't have
I
to
like
be.
to take notes along the side.
You can write notes along the side.
So you don't need copies?
No.
Yeah, I haven't had anything additional, except for the two that Frank added, so you might
Yeah.
want to explain those while I grab them up.
All right. We met with another IT person on Friday, and they spent a good hour and a half here and all, and we talked to the firm out of, company out of Pittsfield. Bottom line, when we go, okay, he understood what we needed. He said, I would budget $2,000 a month for support. Our bid from, what we have from here is $1,600 a month.
So, a little more.
It's
but
a little
it's-
more, it wasn't a formal proposal, he was a smaller organization, he said, well, if I could bring somebody on, there's, so what we have currently in the budget sheet is what we have from the first proposal. He wasn't a bad guy, he knew his technology, but when we asked him, what the number was, we explained to him a little bit of a budget hurry because of the budget. So what I did was, in the sheet that I gave you last week, I went ahead and, I added the Microsoft cost, software cost, and then I added a little budget. So rounding up, there's approximately, just for meeting the IT needs, not the software that goes to the assessor and all that, $38,000 a year.
Is that on this, the version 4?
38, yeah.
And
Okay, oh, here we go. All right.
so you can pass one. I sent it to her.
37.9.
37, okay.
38.
There's one more than that.
Okay. What's the? or is
There's
it
no
like
difference, one I got printed out from Melissa. So.
So, it was gonna, with the other guy, it was $2K for the.
That was just the monthly
Just the
support,
monthly support,
like,
and what, did he have advice that he was, or,
he
it's
was,
not a formal proposal,
there
but
was
I'm
no
just
formal
curious about what he
proposal,
was
but
saying.
he would be using different hardware.
Mhm.
He had the same kind of, because what we're gonna be doing is, when we put the assessors and the tax collector software on the cloud, we'll take a burden off the server.
And so when those go off, the
Yeah.
suggestion is that we could then use the server for the other.
Yeah, and he
backups?
says, which, it is old, but what they're suggesting is that go a year and see how much you're using, because the server's price could be anywhere from 5,000 to
Okay.
15,000. You'll have a better definition of what you want. Ours would be on the lower end because we'd no longer be using what they call SQL language. And, you wouldn't have to have that on it really becomes a storage device.
So the idea would be, over the long-term plan would be to eventually migrate the assessors and the tax
We've already signed contracts.
Right. to the cloud, but to maintain the other departments on the server.
Right.
And eventually, once we know what that need is, upgrade the server.
Right.
So we keep them on the server,
Right.
but it would be a new server rather than a piece of
Oh, right.
equipment, but a piece chosen
For what
for what the actual
actual
need
needs,
is.
and two, is we get all the new security updates.
Okay,
there is limits to the security
Security
of
for the, because of the old machine, I got that part. But I just wanted to make sure I had the overall plan.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's IT. Is there anything else in the 100s?
Just to complete, so it sounds like we're thinking to go with this quote because that would be higher.
Yeah, I think so. Too, I think Melissa, Roger and I felt, the Wiley's group had more support people.
Okay.
And, he talked a
That
little
we're
bit.
paying for the service, it's a little bit less expensive, but it
Right.
has more service providers.
Right.
Thank you for the update.
Mhm.
Yes, planning boards was cut in half because we did confirm.
One quick question, I know the assessors sent a couple of emails about the increase for the clerk. Is the number, I know, but is the 832, I thought the number I saw in the email was different than the 83208 appearing here, but I may not remember correctly, I just wanted to check.
So it was 670 there. My
Yeah.
guess is that the number of holidays from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25 of their schedule is different. And that's adding the addition.
Admittedly, it's not a huge difference in money, so if that wasn't my concern, it's just that the number was different, so it flagged it for me. And I think you may have already answered this question, but I noticed that the 3 police officers are all showing up at more than 4%.
Yes, and that's,
And that has to do with the way the shifts are working?
yes, for fiscal year 24, they were originally proposed it. It's still in 2 schedule, and now it's a 40-hour week schedule.
Okay.
On 135 audit, I thought about it. I would rather put in the 17,500 because if we keep doing an audit each year, I mean, it's an expense we're planning for in the fiscal year. The money that is currently in the special article would spill over into free cash, eventually, and I just feel like it's better to be raising the money each year that we need that year, instead of taking out special articles, and then all we're doing is delaying the hit by a year. And then we end up, like this year, one of the reasons we have increases like HR consulting is because we took it from special articles last year. And I personally,
It would be better to try not to put things that are gonna be regular events in special articles.
well, all I mean to say is that,
I agree with
because you
that.
never know if it's gonna be a one-off for
Right,
special
of
articles.
course.
What I mean here is that I think that we should put the 17,500 in the operating budget because it's money, because it is an expense that we're gonna spend in fiscal year 25. And then the money that we had previously budgeted for it, when we didn't do the audit, I forget exactly how it all went about, would, spill into free cash and we just start fresh. And I just feel like that's a cleaner way of doing it.
I do have one question though. I know that we were doing yearly audits for a while because we needed to reach a certain level. At any point, does it go from requiring yearly audits to every other year audits, or does it stay yearly forever?
We only need yearly audits if we want to get a bond rating. And with a bond rating comes additional costs to get the bond rating.
I see, you have to pay for the bond rating.
What's
What-
the advantage of getting upon that?
That was my question.
So, when you take out loans that are over $1 million.
Oh, you mean like for the fire truck?
But you may not have to take out a loan for that. You could do 1-year notes again, like you did for the library. You could, if we have money saved, we could always put some down for stabilization or something.
Mhm.
But when I talked to the treasurer, she wasn't really enthused that we needed to have a bond rating because we are so financially well off.
I think the only other advantage, well, not the only other advantage, but the other advantage of the annual audit is just identifying any issues and handling.
Absolutely, I just was,
I'm not opposed to it.
I'm not opposed to the audit at all, I just wanted to have a sense if there was a standard of, I won't call it standard of care, but standard operation procedure where, yes, once you've had I'm making this up, right, 5 annual audits and everything's fine, you can go to bi-yearly, or every other year, whatever.
Prior to doing them yearly, we were doing them every 3 years.
Every three?
But if we're gonna do them yearly, then I do agree with you, I realize that it brings the budget this year down, it just. The only reason to leave it this way and fix it next year would be to then keep it consistently. It was a 1-year weirdness, and this happens to be a year where that 17 grand may make a difference in the bottom line.
Yeah,
And if we don't need it for this year, because we have it left over, why not take advantage of that this particular year? Even though I agree with you in
Yeah.
principle.
And we can transfer it on the town meeting floor, so we can say we wanna transfer the fiscal year 24 monies that we have into fiscal year 25.
yeah, no, I'm not worried about it being legal, I'm sure that Eric and. or
So just
whoever-
giving another
Yeah.
option if we
Right.
don't wanna use
It's
it.
not even really at this point that I'm uncomfortable with the transparency of it, it's more so about the principle of raising our operating budget every year with tax money. And then using our free cash to buy, some capital purchases and some special kind of one-off articles. I feel like in hindsight, looking over the past couple years, we'd be in a better place if we practiced.
Well, yeah,
Raising-
I just did that whole thing, I got an article for the town,
Yeah.
Reviews, using that 475,000 free cash.
So that's just where it comes from, and I can see where you're coming from, Susan, about isn't this a year where we could accept that?
You're saying not put it in the budget?
I'm saying this, yes, as a rule, I agree. And if this year, if we weren't seeing such a big jump in the operating budget, but we actually have the money that was assigned for an audit. Like, to me, if we actually have money that was designated for that audit, that wasn't used for an audit, to assign that money this year to do the audit makes sense to me,
Mhm.
right? Like, if it was just money sitting around, it might not, but for that, we're using audit monies for an audit.
Mhm.
And if it can bring down the budget this year and it will otherwise remain, I mean, it makes that one thing look weird because it goes down and then it goes up. But the bottom line is, we already have the money for an audit. Let's use the money for the audit and then we'll go back, cause I don't think this is gonna be a repeatable, I'm not gonna call it occurrence. I doubt that there are gonna be a lot of years where the auditor is like, oh, I just won't do the audit this year.
Mhm.
I think that was a one-off.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, I just look at like the HR line and it looks like we're raising it
I get it,
375%. We're,
yeah,
in our minds, we're level funding it and it just gets awfully confusing.
I'm not disagreeing, but I like Melissa's idea of just at town meeting, transferring the money from a prior year to this year, which we can legally do. That way,
Oh, I'm
it level
not, yeah.
funds the budget without raising the levy.
It's not so much about the legality of it as much as now we have an unfunded future liability in a sense.
I mean,
So the expectation would be that if we have a $5 million operating budget this year, operating budget next year is gonna be 5 million plus COLA and anything we choose to add
right?
or need to add. Whereas if we do things like this, we know our budget's gonna be 5 million plus COLA plus whatever we need to add, and the 17,500 of an audit that we kind of didn't pay for this year, but we know it's
I
probably.
see what you're saying.
So it's like next year before
You're
you've even
lowering this year's
begun,
budget and then increasing next year's budget.
before you've even begun, your budget's already up. And we're dealing with that like this year with HR.
Yeah, no, I see. your
And
point.
that
I
is
see.
like, it's an annual operating expense. And it just seems like taking, a one-time inheritance or gift or.
It's creating
You gotta
fluctuations
scratch
that
off
you
ticket
could,
and then
right.
putting it towards your rent.
Yeah,
And then it gives you a false sense of
Financial security.
financial security.
Right.
I see your point. I do.
That's all.
I didn't see that point previously, so
Yeah.
thank you for your clarification.
That's all. It's just like proving yourself, we can do
Yeah.
our annual budget and taxes, so then next year, if we wanna add something, it's really, we started from scratch, we're not already bumping up, just trying to level fund our services, already bumping up the budget.
Yeah,
But it is a tough pill to swallow, but that would be my personal preference.
I think the tough pill is just because we've got some big jumps in there. I don't, and you're right, maybe we're just postponing that situation. Your thoughts, Frank? Put it back in or leave it out?
I would put it back in.
Alright,
I don't have a strong feeling either
let's
way,
try
unless
with
you're-
it, let's try with it back in, and we know that we always have the choice legally to pay for it with the existing. But let's try it back in, please, once. Okay, is that, if there's nothing else in the 100s, we'll move to 200s.
So you wanna, is there any news from the conversations with the fire department?
Yeah, well, we got to this, I had Melissa take it to 98,000. There's more work to be done. We have a meeting tomorrow at 3:00. So I'm anticipating this will drop. They have some things they have to do. They have a budget number for insurance, but they haven't heard back from insurance and stuff like that, so. I'll know more tomorrow. I talked to Kevin yesterday. I think it's gonna be another week or two before we get to that number.
And the 98 is a number you came up with, but,
Well, they had a list of what their costs were. And
right,
then we went through and we had a general discussion. We said, look, we need to tighten up this, can you tighten up that? They're trying to do some things to get their IT up to par, because nobody's touched it. Have a bookkeeper do their financing, because they're always behind on it.
Right.
So they need to get numbers like that they need to fine tune it. And it's been good meetings, but we go through and we just talk about it and we walk away from, okay, what's it gonna cost us to do that? So there's some areas that we've really identified, but I don't wanna sit here and, Kevin and I had a good conversation. They know what they gotta do. I'll know more about the outcome tomorrow night.
I was gonna say, how good is a 98? I mean, when are we likely to have a solid number?
I think it's gonna be 2 more weeks.
Okay.
But I would
That's fair.
anticipate, my thought, my hope, it will be less than what you see here. This is what we got the number to the last week, so, okay. But there's a checklist of things, there's things they have to do on their end.
Okay, and, where are we with the compensation line?
I don't know.
I haven't heard anything from Sean yet.
Okay, so
So he is going to be coming in any minute now.
oh,
Mhm.
okay,
To ask you guys about the fire truck, it's been, the price is going up another 50,000,
pretty.
unless you guys can confirm that we are at least willing to put it on the town meeting.
Is it?
He
Okay.
has to give them.
This one in February or the one in May?
No, May, I believe.
I thought, were we not putting it on there?
Well, but I
I had
don't know.
asked some questions, because last year we agreed to double maintenance from 30,000 to 60,000. And one thing that was mentioned as an aside was that maybe that truck
Get longer out of
could
the
be
truck.
increased longevity. I don't know, I'm not a mechanic, I haven't really done an inspection of it. Melissa, there's a 20-year guideline from NFPA. Melissa did some research, it's probably worth sending to all of you.
Okay.
That would be great.
It's not, I'll pull it up right now. Just pull it up. So, one thing that I asked Melissa is how much fire tankers are going for on municipal bid. And she said that it's about 10,000, or at most 10,000.
Wait, $10,000?
These are all, within the 20-year, like, they're not brand new tankers, they're us selling.
It's a tanker we're talking
Oh,
about.
so you're trying to find out what the resale value is?
Well, I
The
was,
dollar truck is worth $10,000?
On municipal, that's what
I
they're. don't
know,
know what they
but-
get for a trade-in.
Right.
If you decide to go that way.
yeah, and I don't know, I just thought it was worth having as part of the discussion. Cause I know sometimes we're buying a $60,000, $100,000 vehicle and we get $20,000 back.
Yeah, it's
And so the
like
real cost of it is,
the snow, the plow, you got what, 40,000 for the used one?
Right, but I wasn't expecting it to be only.
no, I was
$10,000 for a
expecting.
$1 million truck.
$100,000.
Yeah.
I was thinking like 40, but.
Yeah.
guess it's not-
But I know-
Up there.
Well, I do know, some towns buy them. And then from NFPA 1911, I guess is the code. Chapter 5, retirement of fire apparatus. Retired apparatus must not be used for emergency operations due to safety measures. Note, Fire Underwriters Survey has published the document Insurance Grading Recognition of Used and Rebuilt Fire Apparatus. In summary, apparatus are built to applicable ULC S515 or NFPA 1901 standards. Apparatus should respond to first alarms for the first 15 years. For the next 5 years, be in reserve status for use at major fires or as a temporary replacement for out of service first line apparatus. Be retired at 20 years of age unless the apparatus meets the recommended annual service and acceptance level tests and has been deemed in excellent mechanical condition. Testing includes weight, road, and pump performance tests. Testing and maintenance only be completed by a qualified technician.
Even with, so I'm just trying to work this out. Does that mean even with those tests having been passed, if you're at the 20-year mark, you can still only use it for backup? Because at 15 years, you're only supposed to use it for backup.
Yes,
Did I
and
understand
I
that?
don't know where this situation would fall in because it is not a backup vehicle when other vehicles are out of service, but it is the second vehicle to respond in most cases.
But it's not, but okay.
So, because it's the tanker truck, so like you usually have your attack truck that shows up with a lot less water, in our case, 500 gallons,
Right,
500. And then that has all of the things, in our case, the ladder, but in, most cases, like all the different hose lines, and whatever you're gonna be used to attack the fire. Then your second vehicle shows up, which is the tanker, which holds usually more water, in our case, 3,000 gallons, which I think is pretty typical. And a lot of times you'll see towns with tanker trucks that are literally just a big water tanker.
Yeah,
right.
Ours has a square body and it has a lot of compartments and stuff that's more typical of the attack engines. But, so it looks a little bit more like them, but it's still the same idea. So then throughout the fire, usually there's only a couple attack trucks that are being used, and then tanker trucks shuttling water from a hydrant or from a pond to those trucks that are the attack trucks. So in our case, it is the number one tanker truck, like it's the first tanker truck out the door, so in that way, it's a first alarm, first due.
Response, right?
But then, I don't know if at all it counts as kind of a secondary vehicle just because it's the second on scene, probably not. That being said, I do, think it's an interesting point, all vehicles should be retired at 20 years of age unless it's inspected by a qualified technician and is deemed in excellent mechanical condition, which would be for the weight, road, and pump performance tests.
And let's imagine that it were deemed in that. I'm still wondering what that would mean in terms of the use of the vehicle. Like, is it, because my point remains, right? Even if it were deemed in excellent mechanical condition on all three of those ratings, wouldn't it still mean that it's only supposed to be used as a backup because it's past the 15-year mark? Plus, we're still talking about another 2 years before we actually probably get that.
is that what they're still saying to you?
I think he said 2 years in the meeting we
I
had
heard
with him,
that, but,
which means that if it's 20 years old now, it's 22 years old by the time we get the truck.
Yeah, I do think, it depends, I don't know exactly how strictly this needs to be interpreted.
Right.
If it's kind of interpreted the way you're going, then trucks should be replaced at 15 years old, because we don't have backup trucks.
Could be, but even if that's not the case, do we wanna go to 22 years? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe you, have a qualified technician inspect it, and it's not in excellent condition, I have no clue. I couldn't tell you.
I suspect that it's in good shape, because Sean
We
told
have
us.
it regularly.
Yeah, I think Sean, he's really good with the maintenance on the vehicle. talking to him about it.
I
I
could have
would be very
sworn he
surprised.
gave some numbers about the, like, hose pressure test and
Well, you
all
do
kinds of
that,
stuff.
Yeah.
I think they do an annual pump test at the least.
Yeah.
And the reason I think the maintenance level before was because they had put off some deferred maintenance.
I think
not
there was the
required
tires or
maintenance.
something,
Yeah.
something like that.
We replaced all the tires.
Oh.
And like I said, Sean didn't come with a plan, sign on the dotted line, if we up the budget, the tanker's life will be extended, but I just recall him mentioning that was a possibility.
Mhm.
So we're at that point. On the other hand, there's gonna be to talk about the cost of it, so.
Mhm.
Maybe go on to the other ones and they'll be in.
Any other things in the
Well-
200s?
Well, I don't know them, I know little information about the compensation, so. I know that Roger and you said it on the meeting. I talked briefly with Roger when I walked out there Friday. Do we want to do a joint meeting with the finance?
And the
see-
fire department again.
Well, yeah, the fine would be great.
I think it makes sense to have
Because
them
it's such a
there.
big number.
It is a big number, and I think that it makes sense to have that conversation, and I know that, I kinda have to say, I know that you wanna recuse yourself from it, but I think you actually know at least as much as we do, if not more, about the operation of the fire company, which makes your comments valuable, even if you recuse yourself from the vote.
I can't, no, sorry. I mean, I think there's
Okay.
different gray areas, but this isn't really one.
No, because
And-
you do,
yeah.
and it is a direct
And this is like,
compensation thing.
it's super direct, and it's me, but it's more so, my father, so I think one of the reasons I need
That's
to
fair.
recuse myself on this particular proposal, aside from I would always recuse myself on this line, is I know that they're, part of this proposal directly impacts,
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
direct family member very significantly, so even if it was $1, I gotta recuse myself,
Gotcha.
this is like, cause that's asking for.
For the
Yeah.
stipend part.
Mhm.
So I see, and I think I've talked about recuse myself from the lease before, I think it was out of an abundance of caution. This one I can't touch.
I agree with you,
10-foot pole. Yeah.
when I think it through, I agree with you. So there's two parts to the compensation piece, one is the, call charge, how much people are paid per hour for the call.
Mhm.
And the second piece is, the concept, I guess, the overnight pay too, is it both?
The shift duty and the calls went
Shift
up,
duty and calls.
and it's not significant, it's the,
The big piece is the daytime calls issue, which I think we talked about it.
There's a little bit here, yeah, there's like 4 people that can,
That are doing the majority of the responses. It was up to 115 daytime calls in 2022. And I can't remember that, he did give me a possible number for 2023, and I don't remember it, but it was higher than the 2022 number. It's a lot of calls. I mean, if you only answered 80, and it was only 2 hours from leaving to when you get back, that's a whole month's worth of work hours you lost. That's pretty significant.
right,
And it's those 4 people because they're the ones that are working in town so they can get there. And they're willing to get there. But it's a big ask, and the ask keeps getting bigger because the number of daytime calls keeps going up. So they're proposing a stipend for the people who are answering those calls.
during the day.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I see the need for it, and I think what he's saying is people are gonna stop being willing to respond to the calls if we don't do something. The flip side of that is you could make an argument for, well, is it biased in favor of people who live in the town, or maybe it is. Maybe that's okay. I mean, I'm not sure how I feel about this. I totally understand the need, and the burden on those people is pretty significant.
Right,
I mean, at the end, I suspect if you went back to the foundation of people being on volunteer fire departments, the number of daytime calls in a year is a lot lower. I couldn't even guess it. Would you guess a historical number of daytime calls from 20 years ago? I mean, we could look at it. be really interesting to see, but I suspect it was a whole lot fewer based on the fact that I know it's been going up, and that's not just since COVID, which made it even worse.
Right.
I don't have any really great ideas about what to do about it,
Mhm. Gotta do something.
but we can't do nothing.
Right, that's,
So Tom was supposed to be talking to the other guys to see if they would be willing to tier it.
okay.
Tom.
Tom,
John.
Tom, Sean.
Sean, I was like, who's that? Sean, yeah, so one thing we talked about was trying to phase things in instead of doing it all at once.
Which that number you have on there is actually wrong. This is one of the numbers we were talking about with Sean, and I never changed it back.
Okay,
It should be under, the compensation line should be 346,210. It's lower on your sheets.
oh, so it should be higher,
Yeah, it should.
yikes, okay,
Yeah, sorry, 346,210 is what it should be. and
right,
it
it's
was-
322 right now,
Until he gets back to us on.
great. So, that's where that's coming from.
Mhm.
What we're gonna manage to work out, I don't know. I see the need, I don't see a solution, but it does feel like it's too big an increase.
Right.
And how we wanna break that down, I mean, I'm gonna go across to the fire department to see what it currently reads. Calculation, so,
Yeah, the two new ones are lines 10 and 11. Should be your.
call to require more staff than duty shift,
No, 10,
or 10.
I'm sorry, 11 and 12.
Okay.
Training officers, that's brand new. It says
Retention
12.
stipend, gotcha.
And so the lines above, line 5, it was 100, now it's 125. The ones that say 40 were 20. No, so
The
he said
duty
the
chief?
40,
Okay,
40 staying the same, the 125 was 100. And the 50,
the training, yeah, 50 was 40.
40. And the 40 was 25.
Is that the duty chief 40 or the night coverage?
No,
40?
the number line 10.
Like 10.
So that's the actual call, so they were getting 25, which would be 50.
Wait,
Minimum.
25, which would be 50,
Yeah,
what?
50 minimum, if it's under 2
Oh,
hours.
2 hours, right.
And now it would be minimum 80, 2 hours. And then 40 for each hour. I mean, personally, I don't think you should touch any of lines 5 through 10, because I mean, they haven't been given a raise.
Yeah.
18 and a half years I've been here.
So, the changes, there's the raises to the hourly stipend for answering calls, and then there's the training officers, which is new, and the housing and retention stipend. But the housing and retention stipend, just to give you a ballpark, is 96K.
120, so you're.
Oh, it's
looking-
120K.
Right, it should have been 120.
Okay.
96 was what you and I were trying to talk Sean
Right,
into considering.
right.
And right now he has 5 people in there at 24,000, but there's really only 4 people that regularly respond.
And one of the things we spoke to them about is that there need to be clear guidelines on what would qualify you for that and a rubric for, we can call it a rubric, but
How frequently you would pay it and the measurables for getting. that.
measurables, that's it. In other words, it's not just a sine qua non, if you show up to one daytime call, boom, you get it, it's more, there have to be some measurables
Right.
that show that you qualify for it. What exactly those measurables would be is a big question. He was arguing, with some merit, I think, that, it shouldn't be I think he was in favor of it being a once a year thing, like a boom, you get it, and we were suggesting that might be, I understand the desire for it, but the measurables have to be more frequently measured than once a year. And it's not clear how that would work. Are we allocating the money before the year or after the year? Like, there needs to be a clear plan that we can assess and talk about the details of instead of just a conceptual plan.
Well, me and I talked about too, like making it quarterly, because what if we end up getting other people who aren't before that he proposed that become eligible for, you know, and let's just say you're one of the people and you go on vacation for 3 weeks, you know, like, it might skew your numbers, but, you know, Susan comes in and she's able to make it for that quarter. So I think it would make it more.
It seems more reasonable to have, it needs to be a long enough period of time of assessment, but short enough that it's not a whole year. I mean, it's difficult to come up with a plan that's workable and fair, but there needs to be some type of plan. And it's not that, like I said, I recognize the need, and I'm not opposed to it conceptually, but it needs to be crafted in a way that can be administered and is reasonable and accepts the possibility. I mean, we can't rule out the idea that if people know that is something you get for answering those calls, they may decide to step up to more calls. But that's a bigger financial burden on the town. At the same time, people are answering the calls and they should be rewarded in some way. I mean, it's like transitioning to a paid fire department, but I don't know what to do about it.
I think Sean's here. So, well, he's coming right.
There we go. Hello. We were just talking about you. Were your ears
Gave
ringing?
a very brief of what you were going into.
Yes.
While he's taking out his coat, can you tell me why the transfer station part-time employee wages only went up 1%?
Higher rates because of people are doing it, and we have higher rates.
Hi, Sean, how are you?
Good, you?
Good.
Let's make it up.
Okay. Hello.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, you ready?
Yeah.
Buckle in. So I got a phone call about an hour and a half or 2 hours ago. I texted Melissa as soon as I got it. Fire truck manufacturer salesman was looking for an update to where the town was at, whether considering doing the fire truck or not. February 1st, the first thing, all the trucks are going up 4.5%. So that's worth somewhere in the area of 45, 50 grand. So I'm just looking to get
Lock it in or not?
They understand you can't lock in, but they would like a notion of more of a head nod that, yeah, you're considering it, or an absolutely not.
So we had a couple of questions that came up while we were talking about this. One is, I seem to recall that you had the truck inspected for a bunch of things, and Justin raised a question of measuring that against the fire, the NFD, National Fire. NFPA.
Yeah.
Rules about truck use. So the truck's currently 20 years old.
Mhm.
They say at 15 years it should only be used after that for
Reserve
reserve status,
status.
which it doesn't sound like it is used as reserve status. But the exception was if it was deemed in excellent condition for the 3 different features that could be inspected. So we had a question of how is it deemed last inspection?
Guess what's your definition of excellence? Careful, don't ruin your.
I would say it would be their definition of excellent.
I think it might even be insurance guideline beyond the NFPA standards, but right, it says all fire trucks should be retired at 20 years old unless a third party official inspector, and it uses the word excellent, deems it excellent in pumping and weight and mechanical or something.
So there's, I don't know how to answer that, I'll be honest, because it comes back to the definition of your excellent versus my excellent might be completely different. And I'm sure you talk to two different insurance agents or mechanics, it's gonna be the same thing.
The other thing that wasn't clear to me is, even at that point, it sounds like you're still talking about you could keep it in service, but it should be a secondary vehicle. And this vehicle is really a primary vehicle, correct?
It is because we only have 2 trucks.
Right. So I'm
There's a
not
lot of
sure that
departments
would
have
make a
3 or
difference,
4,
right?
to make your point.
Yes, if, please.
So there is some more verbiage in the NFPA, whatever you wanna call it, that after 20 years, you're supposed to have it refurbed, which puts it into the excellent condition. And the manufacturers talk about that a lot, and people do that. That makes the truck only good for 10 years, and after 10 years, you pretty much scrap it. So.
What's the trade, I mean, do you have any idea what the trade-in value, I guess
So I
municipal said
had
it was
this-
worth $10,000, so.
The salesman sent a bunch of information to one of the online dealers. I think it was Fernley Mountain. And they offered $80,000 for it.
It's better than municipal.
My gut feeling is on municipal bid, you could do better than that.
So I looked and only found about 10 grand, but, you know, obviously
I
it's the years of
saw
whatever.
that email and
Obviously,
you
I'm also
see-
not a
yeah.
fireman and I don't, you know, I
I don't know, we've
Or-
sold a lot of highway equipment stuff here and done really well on highway equipment. And so maybe it's different because it's fire, but I mean,
Right.
this money that you get for highway equipment, it's only, be bringing half of that or quarter of that.
I mean, refurbishing, I guess, how do you survive with it and how long does it take and what does it cost?
So that's the problem, is it takes, I forget exactly what they did say, but it's probably gonna be a year to get the truck back. So now we gotta go a year without the truck,
Yeah.
and you're into it for probably $500,000 to do it properly. And that number's going up every day too,
Yeah.
like everything these days. So
So 500K would buy us no truck for a year plus a max of 10 years on the other side versus $1 million, which buys us 20 years.
that's correct.
So are there,
So one of my thoughts was if we did that, we could borrow one of Samusfield's tankers for a year.
How many do they have?
He's laughing.
Didn't they just wreck their tanker? Yeah, okay, fine. I was like, wait a minute.
Slightly used and abused.
maybe there's one on municipal to buy potatoes today.
But that comes with its problems too, of liability and fixing it, and you know enough probably from reading newspapers of the issues in Samusfield, so probably not the greatest of ideas. Well, it's not an idea anymore, cause it's just not an option. So, and not too many towns have 2 tankers kicking around.
You can
Just give up. So that's the tough part, without going out and buying one.
And the people that do the refurbs don't have one though, right?
No.
so as far as the new one, that it's gonna go up 4.5% tomorrow. Is there one?
Day after, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is there a 31st?
Yeah, in January.
What is there like a the package that you already have your eye on with the price attached?
So I meant to bring it with me, and if you wanted to give me 2 minutes, I'd go get the plan and show you what it looks like. It's actually less water than what we have now, one less axle, so it's actually cheaper. So if we wanted to replace what we have up there right now, it's about $100,000 or $150,000 more than what we have designed. So, we've scaled back as much as we can scale back. I said, if you want me to just run across to my office.
Yeah, do you want?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Right now.
Thank you.
Would it mean you could go down smaller driveways?
No.
No, probably
I think the
Well,
people need
I
to
will-
fix their driveway.
Yes, it will help,
It will
Will
help,
help
but
greatly.
I wouldn't, that wouldn't be.
because we've reduced the length of the truck by about 4 or 5 feet, so. It's a completely different.
So I think the answer to the question you asked was yes, he does have it truck designed.
Yeah,
That was
I mean,
certainly the impression I had.
No,
well, he's gonna get the plan.
Right, but I think that he not only had a truck design, but the price is based on what the dealer told him that would cost, and that's why he's saying it's gonna go up. That was the impression I had at the previous meeting. Would you agree with that? Yes.
we'll ask them what the lead time is. That's 20, I remember hearing 2 years before.
And I'm pretty sure that when I asked that question at the budget meeting, it was 2 years, but let's ask again, because more ears hearing it is better.
Well, my general sense is we're probably gonna end up borrowing all of or most of, right, this fire truck. But if we can continue aggressive payments in the library and the other smaller vehicles, we'll have them paid down by the time, we'll have little debt by the time that this truck. And if we don't take out any more debt this year and next year, which we can probably avoid. So then the fire truck payment can just like replace the other payments. and-
We'd still be carrying debt, but it's still,
It's obviously he's done his homework, because if he dropped the whole axle off, my question would be, if we ever do get to the district, you know, is that gonna meet, is the truck would meet, at that level, would the truck meet your needs for that? I don't know enough. about it.
To what end?
Well, suppose we went to a district and
Well, but you can talk to Sean, but out here, what happens as opposed to in the city,
yeah,
where they pump from hydrants probably more so, is they run tanker shuttles.
mhm,
So you only have 2,000 gallons of water to start, but there's 10 more trucks lined up.
yeah.
So it's more about the number of trucks than relying on the
total
first.
amount, yeah.
Now you show up
Mhm.
with 2,000 gallons, and that's all you have a bunch of more trucks lined up.
Look at the try.
That money looks like it's wrong with being colored.
I'm not sure it would help me.
I mean, I take it you've been doing your homework for a while on this.
Yeah, this is 4 or 5 months. Actually, it's been sitting around, we've been done for a month and a half or so now. That was that's the final. And this drawing was done. And like, it's 3 or 4 months to get to this point. And hounding us and us hounding him. And
Is there really just one manufacturer, or are there multiple manufacturers, or is there something that points you to this manufacturer?
So this is, we've been with KME since 1996.
Okay, that's good.
One of their positives is that they have a service center right in, just outside of Albany.
Mhm.
And they have mobile service trucks.
Mhm.
They've always done us right.
Okay, no, that's important, if you got an established relationship, you know.
I have threatened to leave them a couple times. But I ended up going back because of the service is, there's nobody else out there that produces the service these people do.
That was the next question, and like, what would the other options be? And there's the answer, so.
And there's a lot of other options, well, I said that loosely. There's a few other options, but they all come out of the same building. Same structure, corporate structure, and it's just whether you buy A, B, or C. And they're all priced the same now, because they're trying to make the trucks more uniform and make more money. Seagrave, there's KME, Seagrave, and Pierce. Those are kind of the separated ones, and then there's just a bunch under the umbrella of what this they call themselves Red Group, KME. There's like 5 manufacturers, and the pricing's all the same. So that leaves us with Pierce and Seagrave. Seagrave, you have to be very nice to them or else they won't build your truck. They're very selective who they'll build trucks for.
They're a business model.
I think they're a smaller company.
Okay.
And they concentrate on like New York City. In Pierce, they're out of their sales places near Boston, and that company as a whole has a lot to be decided.
So is this 1,050,000, is that accurate for this vehicle?
Yes, there's a $25,000 mounting fee, on top of that for tools and stuff. But I don't think that would probably have to go on this year's budget too. We're not gonna, the
Yeah,
other
that's
thing to think
what
about
lead
is,
time, that's what we had a question where you wanted to get it, lead time?
minimum 24 months, 24 to 28 months. So if we put it off a year, 2, or 5, whatever it is, number one, the price is going up, and I asked them, do you see the lead time shortening at any point? And they said not. They said not for the foreseeable future, there's no way they can shrink the times, so.
Well, my gut instinct would be to say that we're interested in like locking in the price, and I don't think that could hurt in any way.
No. I mean, there's no money to be lost by locking in this, locking in. There's no contracts, it's just having, saying, yeah, it's not a definite no. So,
I think, that's what we gotta do, I mean, you have new or refurbish, and there's not a good option for refurbishing, even if it took 3 months or 6 months. You're putting a burden on a group that's already short-staffed and trying to do other stuff, it's, you just,
And it's aging out, so.
it's aging out.
yeah,
And obviously, there's a lot of options, but Sean, you're convinced this will meet your needs and everything?
He's aging it.
yes.
When you drop an axle off.
So, yes, we put a lot of time into thinking about what we need and what we don't need, and we've consolidated. Our goal was to get the shortest truck possible so we can get into places that hopefully will precise in most of the tight areas. Still not gonna replace a 550 size truck, but I think this is gonna do pretty well. We've tried to put the thought of the firefighter, the guys working off of it, unlike the piece that we'll be replacing, that there was no thought, it's an absolute awful truck to work off of.
Someday I'd like to hear about the differences, but
Yeah,
we don't have to take this time.
Well,
Just because I'm curious, but since it's just for curiosity's sake, I was
The best thing would be just to go up there and then
Being given a
give
tour
you
of all
a
the-
tour and a comparison of what's what over
Yeah.
there. And the thought is, if we ever went to one truck, which I don't wanna go down that road, but we might be forced to at some point with manpower issues, this would be,
That would be your go-to vehicle.
yeah,
Mhm.
so.
Because it's small enough and because it carries water. at the
Small
same
enough,
time.
it's got enough water on it. It's got six, or this is a 5-man cab at the moment. We were gonna do 4, but talked into going back to 5, so, yeah, this gives us keeps our options open versus going to a commercial cabin chassis. We went to a commercial cabin chassis, the wheelbase would be longer. They weren't happy with us, but we came up with the number from point A to point B on the axles and said, you're gonna make a truck that works. We got there.
Mhm.
We got there. So, we can get into that deeper in the future, but. Yes, it's, should work.
Mhm.
Is it short as well, or does it just look that way?
As in
with it?
height wise.
Well, I'm just looking at the man.
I forget the overall height. 112 inches, so it's a foot plus longer than the other truck. So I'm not prepared for this tonight, but this is off the cuff, so, I don't have all my details with me, but yes, it's considerably lower.
Is that good, bad, or indifferent? I mean, like, was it intentional or was it a byproduct of shortening the wheelbase or?
That was our goal. We wrote our goals down, short wheelbase,
Lower
short-
height, okay.
lower height, for firefighter safety,
Yeah.
ease
Yeah,
of
they
use.
reach out, you know.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tall and I have a hard time working off that other truck.
Gotcha.
You should talk to Sandersfield, maybe they'll buy it.
Yeah,
$50,000
Well,
down.
that would, I don't even know if we're allowed to
Resell
resell it directly
so,
to like Sandersfield.
so in my discussions with the former chief, who reached out to me about this truck up here, I asked him about his ISO ratings and his NFPA stuff and how they're set up over there. They have enough engines that they don't need a conforming ISO truck. So that would meet what they have over there. It's basically just an extra piece over there as a reserve truck, so. Still don't fully agree with it because it's an old truck, but that's, so.
So, would they be interested in buying the current engine 7?
At the moment, they were,
Yeah.
but he is now longer fire chief,
Chief,
so.
yeah.
If it's over, and if we are anticipating the value of being over 10,000, we'd have to.
Still gotta bid it out, yeah.
Unless you're using it as a trade-in.
Unless
I
you're using it as a
remember you
trade-in.
saying that the 10,
Yeah.
50, the $1,050,000 price was conditional on that being a trade-in or not?
So 80 would come off of that money,
Because of the trade-in.
yes.
Okay. So that the presumed trade-in isn't included in that price, but would be applied to it.
Yeah.
And if we traded in, I mean, the putting it out to bid is not an issue then?
And then this will need just a little bit of new equipment on it. I don't have the list with me, but it's a very small list of stuff, but it's 2 years out.
Agreed.
Let's not even
Let's not-
I'm thinking 2 weeks.
I know, right? Just wanna get
I
it
just
done.
wanted to put it in your head that, It is a little more than $1,150,000, so.
Well, would it be cleaner just to raise the 1,075,000 and then we don't have to worry about it?
The 25 came out in.
No, because you're not raising it right now,
We're debt.
you're only asking permission to borrow it.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that the equipment later would probably come to 25,000 or something, you would just have a special.
Probably between mounting and equipment, I'd say we're gonna be in the 50
Yeah,
range.
you could use your stabilization, not why pay interest on it when you would have 50,000 to. And why lock that up as a part of the loan? It's up to you.
I just also thought then you don't have to worry about it down the road. You have,
I agree with
You-
you,
you
I
have-
don't disagree with that.
you have everything
Yes.
set aside, you got the
Yeah,
truck on
it's a
order.
the equipment he needs is part of the truck. The truck's not, I won't say it's not good, but it's good, if you don't have the equipment.
So your thought was to go ahead and get approval for borrowing up to 1.1?
Yeah, it's just an idea, it's just an idea, but,
Yeah, well,
you know, then it's not like,
when we tell
2 years
people
down
that
the
it's gonna be this, we need to include the equipment cost.
There's something to be said for that, because like, it's approval to borrow that much, should something
Yeah.
change and should we decide to finance it another way, we have the opportunity to do that, it's not committing us to actually borrow all that, it's just giving us the
Yeah, that's
option
the
to
number,
do so.
and we can say it's a truck.
Am I correct
necessary.
when I said that?
yeah, but I assume if we authorize borrowing, we would borrow. The thing we could do then is just take, if we wanted to pay off a chunk of it right away, the first year, we could pay off 200,000 for stabilization or something.
Right, we could not even take the full, we could pay some of it with stabilization and
Yeah.
take the remainder out.
I think it's just cleaner to borrow it all and pay it off right away,
Why?
cause it's just cleaner.
We're
So
getting,
let's
we're
talk
getting,
about it.
Okay.
we're getting in the
Sure,
weeds.
yeah,
here.
right.
We're getting-
Okay,
We gotta
so-
worry about
yeah.
25's budget, you're.
Yes.
I'm working 2 weeks, you're working 2 years.
To lock it in at that point,
Yeah.
and we'll
Yes,
see where it goes.
yeah, the answer is yes.
Thank you.
The question about the stipends came up again, so at some point, I think we should have another conversation, I'm not sure who should be part of that, because I think in order to go forward with that, we need to have a plan for frequency of payments, the deliver, like what the metrics are for measuring if someone is
I agree
qualified for
100%.
it.
Did you talk to them about?
I haven't got there now.
Yeah, I get it.
I need this week, I need as many hours this week as I can get.
I'm not trying to keep you from it, we're just letting you know
No, I
that we're
get
gonna
it.
need
I
to
just-
have it before we
I
can.
gotta get through this week and then
Okay,
my feet will come back to.
me too.
Well, thank you for doing what
Yeah.
you've done.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him calling and saying,
Mhm.
You got it.
he caught wind of this and this is a big jump, so.
Yes, it is, and good for him for reaching out to you, and
Yep,
thanks for keeping us
and I
apprised.
do this quarterly, so,
Mhm.
Price increases?
if there is one, it's quarterly,
Yeah.
Yes.
It's probably now a steal.
yeah. Alright, back to my other meeting.
Have fun.
Yep, thank you.
I think, just getting back into the budget, we're through 200s. We'll skip 300s.
No, I actually wanna give you a heads up, I heard today that, Marlboro uses the same insurance groups that the school does, Berkshire, insurance group, or health insurance, something like that. And I got their number today, which is 7%, so she said, just keep that in mind, because the school has over 80 employees that are now gonna have a 7% increase, so so I only calculated in a 3.5% increase. So
For the
that
school
number
budget
could
on
be
the
a lot
whole.
more than what I was estimating,
Okay.
so keep that in mind.
Are the percentages rounded or truncated? Just curious. Like if it's 3.6, will it say 4%, will it say 3%?
Yeah, that helps.
On
I know
my
the
here-
feeling.
On what shows up
We'll
on
see
here?
ya.
Because I moved it so that it wouldn't show as many decimal points.
Yeah. Well, we can look at that, I was just curious, we can look at that, but
Sure.
If you go to the actual individual tabs, you'll see how much it is.
Well, I'm just thinking if something's 3.9%, it should really say 4%.
Yeah, but it's actually showing at 3.01%, I just changed the decimal reading. Is that what you're looking for?
I'm just saying, in theory, I don't know if any of
It
them say.
does, rounding always, like, anything that rounds would round anything above 3.5 to 4.
It would, okay. I didn't know. Okay.
That's how, that's a consistent metric. But, you know, there's still a difference between 3.5 and 4, or 3.6 and 4, because if you're paying it, that can be real money, but
Yeah.
anyway. So that's the suggestion that their insurance costs are gonna go up 7%.
That's
No, not even
official, it's
insurance,
going up
schools.
7%.
Schools operating.
Right, they don't,
Oper-
no,
Their whole-
the insurance is going up, so we use Maya, they use Berkshire, whatever it's called. And Mari was telling me today that they got the notification that it's going up 7% for fiscal year 25.
The insurance.
Yes,
But
so
when-
health insurance, and so she
Right.
said, just keep that in mind, because
Right, they have a lot of people, which means their
employees.
operating budget's gonna go up,
Okay.
but not necessarily
Not necessarily
7% of their
7%.
whole budget, but that's gonna
It's not
increase
gonna
their
be
costs.
3%.
it's probably not gonna be 3.5 that I put in there.
But that would show up in schools operating and transportation,
Right,
you know, some way or another.
yes,
Okay. That's
highway, I think you got my email, that
400.
Jim lowered 2 of his internal line items by 10,000, and we took the grader tires out.
Right.
Because I did send around a request asking everybody to answer me by this afternoon.
Mhm.
I noticed parks lawn maintenance went down.
Yes, parks,
You got an email on that, they removed 2,600 for maintenance, spring fall cleanup.
How'd they get it down?
so there was a $2,600 request in there from the native plant working group to,
Right,
so they said they want them, they're not gonna get that in there and have to go to Concom, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
And then,
Also, another thing that I saw in their budget, I don't think if it's reflected in here or not, but the signage for the Brewer Pond Trail,
That's,
it should be from the Concom fund. I mean, Concom paid to build the trail, shouldn't they pay for the
Signage.
signage? I just throwing it out there, I've been saying that for a year.
last time.
I mean, it's up to the Concom, but I would think if you're willing to pay to build the trail, you'd also pay for signage.
Signage,
It
yeah.
seems all wrapped up together. Anything else in the 400s,
Not for me.
500s?
Actually, I think we're up to 600. Parks lawn.
Well, yeah, you
I
don't,
had it,
yeah.
Sorry.
So 600s, we talked about Parks Lawn. You know, the other question is, should we just make it a post-commission account that wraps up the maintenance, spring, fall cleanup, and I don't know why
We
we
need
have
to change it to, so there's not two different
Yeah.
lines.
I don't know, just a thought. But in any case, they're down 16 in their general account and up 10 in their lawn maintenance, so they're actually down overall.
So, yep.
Right.
The budget is down 8.96%.
Actually getting as much done as they are.
So debt service will be, we'll have that discussion, what is it, next week?
Yes, like I told Justin, if I get the sheets from the, David there, and Sarah and I have time to go over them, he's gonna come in on Tuesday. If we don't have enough time to do it, then I'm moving him to the following.
I'd rather
Today,
not
I
have
have
any
not.
errors, so we have a conversation the first time.
As of today, I did not receive anything, so.
Is there a reason we're not putting anything to principal in here, or are we doing that at a future?
It's the timing of the loan that we wouldn't owe principal.
I see. And we can't prepay principal, as I recall.
You can't
until-
prepay, but you could put in some in here if you'd like to. We're only gonna owe interest on those 2 next year, on the truck and the medical rescue.
But it was a 1-year loan, right?
It was, and she explained something to me, I'm not sure I understand with the truck, I think it's because we ended up raising the 44,000 and we paid.
Okay.
I didn't understand it, but I think it has something to do with these.
Just,
way these
we've been
municipal
trying
loans.
to make sure that we applied principal whenever it was possible to do so. So I'm just getting on board that if we have the opportunity to pay principal, we should probably pay down principal where we can, especially if we're trying to retire the maximum amount of debt in time to be.
Right, I mean,
ready
if you
to
see
carry
last year,
that.
you put principal, you did 41,430 and you didn't have to.
Right, and I'm saying,
All I put in here is what you had to pay, so that you
Okay.
guys can tell me, like,
and we're having that
Add monies
conversation next
in.
week, so that's fine.
The only other thing while we're on it is last year, our hands got a little bit tied when we received a vehicle before the beginning of the fiscal year and couldn't apply the money immediately. It only cost us $1,000 or something. But we couldn't apply the money immediately. It was that highway truck. Even though we had the money, it was before the end of the fiscal year. So maybe we can talk with the accountant, the treasurer, and see how, if we're gonna, when are we supposed to receive a medical rescue vehicle?
I believe Sean said he was hoping in February or March.
So that would be,
So we're immediately, we're gonna take what, like a 6-month note or something? To receive it?
No, she's gonna take out a note so that it'll line up with the November payments.
Yeah.
but we.
We wouldn't owe anything until November.
Okay.
But, and I'm not gonna make this too complicated, but I remember what we ran into last year was, I think it was slightly different, but because we received it in May or June. We had a bunch of money that we couldn't put against it.
Because
We had to pay more
because we had to wait till July.
interest.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, it was,
So I think the question you're asking is whether it's possible for us, if we're foreseeing receiving a vehicle before July 1, to set money aside so that it's possible to pay immediately rather than to wait.
rather than borrowing money that you don't need to borrow.
Right.
That being said, I think this is a different situation.
Okay.
But it jogged my memory
Right.
that our hands were kind of tied. We received the vehicle, we could have put money immediately against the principal, and we couldn't. But, I mean, that stuff happens too, but it'd be nice if the sooner we can pay the principal, the better, right? It's like some people pay their, weekly instead of monthly,
Right.
and you're not paying for those. Anyway, I'm not gonna get too in the weeds, but I'm curious to hear what our options are about debt service. And then in the 900s, the big increase is.
So we also have to
health
consider whether we're gonna have that kind of increase in our health insurance as well, right? Or do we have numbers and they're solid for our?
She said she's hoping to get it to me by the end of this week.
Where did you get the number that's in that room?
I estimated 4%.
Oh, okay.
They gave me a range of where it was gonna be,
Mhm.
2.5 to, I think it was 9.9, so we're usually on the lower side, so I figured 4 was safe.
So 4%, and then it's a change in how many plans or what the plans are, which is counts for the remainder of the thing.
Right, we had one that went from a single to a family. What this was originally. And right now, there's a cushion for a family, so if you wanna try to lower it, we can, put a cushion for just a couple plan in there, I'll tell you, it doesn't lower it by much.
Well, what I'm just wondering is, if, when you get those numbers, could you just please lay out what the contingency is? Like, okay, this is what we know we're gonna need to pay for the people who are currently on the plans, and then this is the amount that we're setting aside for contingency. Thank you. If we're done with the operating budget, we can talk special articles.
Can I ask why the cultural council is always a special article?
They have to be, cultural council.
It's probably told me this at some point.
The state cultural council account.
Okay.
State cultural council account said that the town must request funds in the form of a special article,
Okay.
and all funds from the council must be in one revolving account.
Yeah.
They used to be part of it.
So where are we at with the culvert match in chapter 90 and whatnot?
So I was just talking to Susan about that, I was thinking you guys should take it out of there because chapter 90 funds would be an eligible use of the funds. So that's how we can meet Courtney's needs of the grant, saying that we have it there, and then we can deal with it at a later date, you know, whether we have to go to a special town meeting and raise the money or whatever.
Or say grant money
Or get grant money, or however
Okay.
we have the intention, we can give them the, yes, we have the funds.
So I guess the next question is, it's kind of tempting to use them, to use chapter 90
It
for
is,
the culvert.
I want you to just talk with Jim and see what he has, on
Yes,
the
yeah.
horizon for chapter 90.
Because then we may
Putting-
just be robbing Peter to pay
Right.
Paul and have to do a special article to pay for something that he already was planning to use that money for. The other thing is, I'm hoping we can get some grant money to underwrite some of that. Do I remember correctly that Courtney said during the meeting, what was that, the 11th, 10th, whatever, I was just looking at the minutes, but I don't remember which one, it might have been the 18th. That she was gonna talk to her colleagues at BRPC that were in the roads and planning, to see if they knew of grants that we could apply for, because it's a slightly, there's a different group of grants available for that. It wasn't in the minutes, but that's what I remember her saying. I just wanted to see if other people remembered, so I don't have to go back and.
I didn't remember
We
that, I remember
watch it.
giving us a cheat sheet of what grants were available.
She did do that, but then during the meeting, she said that she would reach out to her colleagues in the roads division and see if they knew of other grants that might be applicable.
My recollection was that she laid out 4 grants.
Mhm.
The phase 3 of MVP was by far the most likely that we're gonna get, and by far, really funded it.
I would concur.
There were 2 that she really thought that our eligibility and competitiveness was questionable. And then there was another one that wasn't for much and couldn't be used as a match, but we could use it to pay for the non-match part of it or something. But in any case, we were probably going to, a good 360,000. I mean, for some.
But I have a pretty clear recollection of it, and I'm just wondering, should I reach out to her, or should Melissa reach out to her to just check in with her? I can watch the minutes of it to
Yeah.
just check that I'm correct, but
We have a monthly meeting with her next Thursday, so.
can you just raise it?
Um,
That'd be great. Because if there are a potential other source of grant money that
Yeah.
aren't environmentally based but are roads based, it might be a completely different pool. Right, because MVP and the other ones that she mentioned are all sort of environmentally directed, which is fine, I'm not saying that if they're applicable, we shouldn't apply. But if there's a whole nother set that's road based and we could apply for those as to meet part of the match, that seems like a win, right? It's another pool of potential money.
So I think the 360,000 is already including the MVP. I know this is kind of unrelated, but I think it is really. So the MVP, going with the MVP, the project would cost 600,000 because it exceeds the $3 million.
Right.
But there's also the 10% match from the $3 million, which is
10% of 3 million would be 300,000.
300,000 roughly. So it exceeds the cost of the project, plus there's a match. But then there's the DER municipal culvert replacement, which is not a match to MVP, but could be used in conjunction with MVP, I believe. So the max award of that is 400,000. So we could use it to cover the overage of the MVP grant, but we couldn't use it as a match to MVP.
Do I recollect that she didn't think we qualified for the DER one?
No, I think that she thought
That
that
one
we were
would-
competitive. The
okay.
other 2 were seemingly, the FEMA hazard mitigation, it seemed like was practically impossible because we haven't really had monetary damage. And they actually want to see a cost benefit to show that
Right, that's worth doing.
it's worth doing, and we haven't really had any provable.
I remember the
verifiable
conversation about the
monitoring.
flooding basement.
And then the raise grant has no match and no cost, but it sounds like it doesn't meet a lot of the rubric points, so it might not be very competitive. So all that being said, I guess the question for Jim is, how much money do we have in chapter 90? What's the plan? And how much money are we expecting going forward? And I understand that's somewhat unpredictable.
We have $613,557 in chapter 90 currently. We usually get about $190,000 a year. And you have to talk to him about, I know he's got some culverts, or several culverts, some roads. I just don't know how much they total.
Well, Ken,
$30,000 in data repairs.
if he could just lay it out in kind of like a plan, that would be helpful, because it's really hard to wanna not spend it without seeing what exactly it's
Knowing
going
it's
for.
already mentally allocated for.
Yeah.
Other projects that are needful.
And when do we get that money each year?
We usually get notification of it around June, and I think it comes in like September, like it's officially ours in September.
So in September, we should hopefully get another roughly 190,000. Okay.
It will show you the history that you got, and it's based on miles and population.
Okay.
Did you actually make it through the whole budget? Stop.
And then, as far as the other special articles, we have quite a lot of free cash, so maybe we could pay for most just right out of free cash and not borrow for the trucks. But we'll have to put all those, because for whatever reason this year, we don't have a lot of little special articles.
The current free cash is 434, is that what's on there? Okay. Yeah, right.
Right now, I have the 2 trucks coming out of stabilization.
Well, what would it look like to take the 2 trucks out of free cash? Does that put us in a negative free cash balance?
We got about 450.
434.
Yeah, 434, but I need to know what's gonna be
But then we
spent
have
at a special town meeting. So we should have that conversation.
Well, what would it, can you quickly change those to free cash? Would it tell us what?
Change those, yeah.
And are you, just out of thought, are you thinking like things like the SBVA with that?
I'm thinking like if we're $20,000
$20,000.
short or $40,000 short, we say we can only spend 30,000 on milfoil and we can only spend 50,000 towards Southern Berkshire, and something like that, maybe, potentially.
I'm just a little worried that they'll just say hasta la vista.
Well, we
I
can
didn't have
double
the-
check, but
Yeah.
like, they're still getting $50,000 a year.
Yeah, but
Up
last year
until-
they were pretty clear, pay,
I don't know
that's
what
the,
they can legally do. I mean, we can ask.
they can just.
We're on
say they
decently
want
good
to.
terms with them. you
Yeah,
know.
but that's what, I mean, my recollection was pretty clear, that last year it was like, this is the bill, you either pay for the service or you don't, it's not really, it was not, they were
It's
not
not
negotiable
negotiable.
at all about the amount.
I remember, but they went up 36% after going up from 0 to 50,000. So there has to be some sense of reality. I mean, 36, I understand, but if we have a contract with them, right? I understand ambulances are going under X, Y, and Z, but we've established now a pretty stable relationship through the contract. And we're not gonna do 36% every year, right? It's not gonna increase 36%
I'm not gonna
every year.
disagree with you, I just, how long was the contract? It's a 1-year contract, isn't it?
Yeah.
They're just gonna say they can't.
I think, well, let's just see where we're
Let's see,
at. but-
sure.
But
And
wouldn't
I
feel
do need to
horrible.
call him and get some clarity on some things, but I can ask him that, but I'm willing to bet that the answer we'll get back is, that's the fee, you either pay
Well, we
it
can
for the
ask-
service or you don't.
Well, we can also ask town council what happens, like, can a ambulance service refuse to cover us? What if we agree, 10%'s great, right? Imagine if you had a contract and went up 10% every year. What if we say, we can do 10%, but we're gonna cap it at 10%? We can't do 36%.
It's untenable long-term for sure.
Yeah, so
Not even sure
I'm
it's
just-
this year, but
I'm just throwing it out
Yeah,
there
yeah.
as an option, and I would be willing to engage with them. We've been, when they asked for 50,
53.
$51,000 last year, we did it. We went through the contract, but let's do something that works long-term for both of us, because if they're going up 36% every year, we're gonna be looking at a certain point about our own ambulance or joining with other towns because of that.
It's not sustainable.
So that's all I'm saying is I'd like to make it long-term sustainable with Southern Berkshire. I've always said that, but it takes two.
Right.
And we can maybe a little bit earlier and more often say, we're not gonna do this arbitrary price increases every year that are just through the roof.
Meanwhile, I'd like to hear something from them about what they're doing to increase their reimbursement rate, because it's pretty bad.
We should have a collection agency.
So what would happen if we tried to pay for both those out of free cash, knowing that we have.
What, the two trucks?
Town meeting
You pay for the two trucks out of free cash, it'll give you $150,443
in free cash.
in free
Two.
cash. That's only
Okay,
paying those two.
so
But just the two trucks, it
Oh,
I
doesn't
think, yeah,
cover
but then
the town.
we'll get
STM.
something for the one truck that will go back into free cash.
Not,
The following
not
year.
yet.
Yeah, the following.
So then,
And that doesn't include the STM uses of free cash if we're doing any.
150, but minus the 30 for retiree. And then 60 for town hall maintenance would be 90, so that's pretty much all. But I think two figures that, might have to be open to negotiation if I'm looking at these would be, well, there's three. It would be milfoil control, Southern Berkshire, and town hall repairs. And we've supported in the last year or two, the milfoil and the Southern Berkshire, but it's not like, we don't just like print money every year, so.
So I'll call SBA Thursday or Friday and see if I can have a conversation with them. I just want you to be prepared for the fact that they may say, pay it or don't pay it, but it's paid for service.
Well, then we'll do our own research on what they can do and also say, and I'd be willing to say, we want a long-term relationship, but it's gotta work for both of us.
That's kind of multiple years, doing 10% for 3 years or something.
Yeah, something, but like, just throwing 30+% on us every year is not gonna be a long-term.
We have to budget for stuff.
Yeah,
You can't budget for that. You can't, nobody,
I also would like to hear like some concrete plan to improve their reimbursables, because that's what's crippling their budget.
I mean, Susan, where did you get, is that confirmed or
Is what
confirmed that they're having a hard time collecting from insurance?
when they sent the letter for the increase, didn't it say something in there though? Or did they just send the number? I'm trying to remember.
The Berkshire Eagle ran a story,
On them,
about 2 or 3 months ago.
and maybe I got something from that too. I mean, I know historically, the biggest issue they were having meeting their budget is poor reimbursables. And then, Sean tells me that one of the local companies has like 100% reimbursement at like 2,000 a trip. And that tells me that if someone is on the case, the
Yeah.
volunteer they have just keeps hounding till they get the reimbursement from the
If the
insurance
person
company.
5% of
Versus just
the
accepting, well, they turned it down and there's nothing we can do about it.
person got a ride.
But it's the insurance company that refuses to pay and you have to argue with them. And it happens all the time. And, often if you fight with them, but you have to be willing, you have to have someone that's gonna stay on hold for 2 hours. And I wish I was kidding, but that's what it took me to get through with my insurance company, who turned me down for a visit to my regular doctor. It was a telehealth visit for COVID. And they said it was a rural clinic and they weren't gonna pay for it. And I had to spend 2 hours on hold to get them to investigate. In the end, they paid for it. But someone has to spend those 2 hours on the phone for every single one, and sometimes it's multiple times. And if you don't have the staff to do it, or a volunteer that's willing to sit there and have that argument every single one, I guess you don't get the reimbursement.
So we'll move on to the warrant, if that's all right with everyone. We are an hour and a half in,
Yep.
which,
And we need to get this finalized so that we can send it to the,
yeah,
You
I
don't have
mean,
to finalize it until next week, but
but, yeah.
um. So what I would do first is I would just order them from high to low. People like that.
Change the order of the articles from
Yeah.
high to low.
The second thing,
from high to low,
yeah,
So the bigger ones
The
are,
bigger
I
dollar.
would have thought lower to high.
no, I think it's better high to low
Their
because.
attention, well, if you do the high at the end, your attention is paid.
Yeah, suppose you could do it to try, but I think, let them argue about the big things, and then the small things seem inconsequential and just get done quickly.
so the second question is, do we wanna take some stuff from special articles this year rather than free cash?
From what inspector session?
From this storm damage special article. I think that leaves us more free cash at our annual town meeting, but it confuses the heck out of people, which is one thing that happens. And then the other thing is that money will spill into free cash in the fall. So it's not like that money's. going
It's not lost, why do you think it confuses people?
Because I know, because people come, because we did this, we've done this, and since I've been on the board, and it confuses the heck out of people
Well,
when we were doing it. And I was in favor of it, at the time, but people were like, why is money coming from health insurance and from unemployment insurance and
right,
stuff? And fire department compensation, and to pay for, you know,
because we had leftover monies in one account, and so the pro of doing it is that it keeps more in free cash.
for
so that
annual
we
town
can-
meeting.
For annual town meeting, and the same issue of not applying one thing to another is true at annual town meeting, right?
Right,
So you're arguing in favor of just letting these monies wash over into next year's free cash to simplify the meeting, but I'm inclined if we I get your point.
Yeah.
What if we only did it on one article, like used all of that money to apply to one article? Maybe that doesn't work because we don't have one that's the exact amount. But then
Well,
we'll
I'm
have to
sure-
explain it one
So if
time.
we dig through the budget, we're gonna find probably places that we could transfer out of, which is what we did last year.
That's really the only one.
That's the only one?
Yep.
What about like community center lighting?
You're not gonna take from community center lighting to pay for one of these things, because they probably have a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even,
They want
I
that
don't
for
even
their
know why
pavilion.
the storm damage article was carried over in
It
the
wasn't
first place.
supposed to be,
Yeah.
Eric admitted he made a mistake, and
That's,
in my list that was of items that weren't supposed to be carried forward, he made a mistake.
I thought that we signed off on it, cause we
You
carried
did.
off,
He just didn't do it.
no, I thought we signed off on it being carried forward as a special article.
I don't think we did, because I thought
No, we did.
the storm stuff was already finished, we didn't have.
It was. But the same thing with the audit, I don't remember signing off on the audit being carried
There
forward.
was no audit to be carried forward, that was encumbrances, so that wasn't a special.
I thought we looked at all the special article carried forwards and encumbrances.
They're two different things.
I know, but I thought we looked at all of them.
You only have to look at special articles.
We didn't have to look at anything, we only this year looked at them because, no,
You have to
seriously,
look at
we
them.
never looked at them before.
You're right, I usually
This was
just
the
sign off
first
on it.
year that we did it. I thought we carried over storm damage because we weren't sure if it was spent. It really does confuse people when we do this, and,
Is potentially confusing people better or worse than just letting the money sit there when we have it and could use it?
well, I'm sure we could find other accounts, like, I don't know, we can't lower salt and sand on at the annual town meeting.
But if people get confused that you're transferring money from one thing to another, they're not gonna get less confused that it came from one thing versus another. That argues that if it doesn't, you're arguing that if it doesn't come from free cash, they don't understand why we're transferring it from one thing to another. That's gonna apply whatever we transfer it from.
What I'm saying is, if we could look at, like, I don't know if you're allowed to do this mid-year. I know you have to keep salt and sand, snow and ice at the same amount each year at annual town meeting, but let's say we look at it now, we've only spent, I don't know what we spent, so let's say we spent 50,000 out of 150, we know for certain we're gonna have 50,000 left over at least. We could go and put that 50,000 towards transfer station operation. Then it lowers our free cash certification in the fall. I'm just gonna say, my preference would be to take a lot of free cash.
For this town meeting.
We've done it the other way. That's
Your
just-
way, we're not gonna get the free cash that you're talking about until fiscal year 26.
Until this fall.
No,
For-
you'll
Right,
you'll
but you
be
won't
told.
use it
Till
until fiscal year
26, you'll be told what number it is in the fall,
Right.
but you
No,
can't.
I mean, you can use it at special town meetings.
Right, but that's next year.
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't.
well, the storm damage shouldn't have been carried over in the first place.
Well, then
But-
let's use it so it's
Yeah,
not
I
an
mean,
issue
do whatever you want, but people get confused, it's not really right. This is what's been going on, and like with the operating budget, instead of raising the amount of tax for the operating budget every year, we took a whole lot of free cash and we move around special articles.
You're not gonna get me to argue on
And
that,
so-
and you made a convincing case for the 17K for the audit, you did. This one though, this doesn't make sense to me, because I feel like this is legitimate money that wasn't used for its original purpose. And we have it to use for something else, and there doesn't seem to be another pool of cash other than the other pool of free cash. But if we use, the only other thing is to wait to use that money indefinitely because it's confusing for people. But it's a legitimate use of the monies that we have, and not using it seems like, to me, a worse thing than using the money to pay for something that you need to pay for. We have it, it can be used, why are we not using it? Because it's confusing? That's a
No,
strange rationale.
it's really more, and Susan, if you got the audit thing,
Right,
I'm essentially making the same case, which is that I think the way that it should work is every year you raise your operating budget and taxes. And you could have $500,000 in free cash, but you don't put it towards your operating budget, because every year you raise your operating budget and taxes, right?
Right.
And then next year you start from that baseline and decide if you wanna raise it. Then what you do at your special town meeting is you take the leftover, the free cash, and you use it against unforeseen expenses. And then the following year, you get certified the amount of free cash. It's kind of very clear how everything works.
but if you had
Yes.
leftover monies from a special article or a special, this money was storm damage special article, right? It was already free cash from a special article, right?
Yeah.
So how many years do we wanna carry that?
I
forward?
didn't wanna carry it forward this year, but we did.
But my point is, then let's finish with it and be done.
Okay, I made my case.
Where are you at, Frank? Cause you could be the
Yeah.
tiebreaker here.
Go for it.
It's a small amount of money, I'm not gonna, it's not a hill I'm gonna die on, but I made my case.
Yeah, because I think it should be, not from free cash.
So transfer from the articles.
Yeah, transfer from the line.
And then I think the next question is, are we legally allowed to transfer from, I don't know where our salt and sand budget is at,
You can't transfer from
we can't.
Cause this
No,
is
it's
right in the middle
here.
of the hard
Well,
season.
let's look at it, how much money we spent, let's look to pay, where can we get the other money from, cause last year when it came,
You can't, we're in the current year. What if there's
We did
eight-
that last
and
year.
God, please don't do it to us, but what if there's like 8 snowstorms?
well, then maybe not that account, but last year when we came across the same issues, we went and we found fire department compensation, we found, unemployment insurance, we found a few different things. If you're gonna go that route, go that route.
I think what she was arguing is that she looked and there wasn't.
No,
There wasn't.
no, we can't transfer from the current. Sorry,
Yeah.
you guys always bring up these things at like 8 o'clock at night, and it's way past my bedtime. Can you put that in an email and I
Yeah.
will get back to you so I give you the right
So-
answer?
I'm not gonna put an email, but I'm gonna say it clearly. So I believe last year we did essentially the same thing at special town meeting. We took from lines that we knew, from operating budget lines from that current fiscal year, that we knew were gonna have money left over at the end of the year. We transferred them to pay for things at special town meeting. My opinion would be, don't go that route. Susan and Frank wanna go that route, essentially, as far as I'm concerned. If you're gonna do it, do as much as you can. Look in every nook and cranny of the budget to find the money to pay for, the 10,000 for the IT. If you're gonna do it, do it. I wouldn't do it.
So I guess my response to that initially would be, the budget that we're proposing for fiscal year 25 is so slim right now that I think it was there's not going to be any extra in the normal operating budget this year, like there was last year. Maybe last year there was some things that we were accounting for, like higher gas prices and this and that. This is a more realistic, based on things leveling out, you know what I mean? Am I
So
making sense?
last year's special town meeting, I just pulled it up. Highway capital account to the fuel account. Fire department compensation account,
And when was that special town meeting?
January, wasn't it? Okay.
January 21st.
Yep. January 21st. Fire department compensation account, and free cash to fire department equipment and maintenance. That's free cash from the unemployment insurance account to the building inspector's wage account. This one's health insurance account to new Concom agent wage. This one is town clerk expenses to the election account. That's like, some of them are within the same office, which I kind of get.
Yeah.
Right, like town clerk expenses to election seems different than storm damage to transfer station or whatever, I'm just making that up. Unemployment insurance account to the assessor's expenses account.
I guess you did
Unemployment
this last
insurance to
year
library wages.
was because you didn't want to use your free cash, because you wanted to save it for annual town meeting.
Yeah.
So that would follow along with what Susan and Frank are
Yeah, that's
agreeing
what
to.
because we talked about, we use free cash for the vehicle, on it. And I go back to what we did last year. I understand his concern.
No, but hear me out.
Okay.
So I understand where you are coming from, because I signed off on that warrant last year and supported every article,
Right.
okay? I'm not there anymore. I don't wanna do it that way.
Mhm.
But if you're gonna do it, you should do what we did last year, which was thorough.
Oh, I wasn't disagreeing with you.
Okay, so now I understand where you're coming from. I can
Yeah.
tell you that as of this moment, there is not going to be any extra money. in those
Nowhere?
accounts. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I can with what I just gave you, that 6,800 is there from the storm damage account. There's $512 in the HR manager account.
Anyways, that's my advice, is if we're gonna go that route.
Mhm.
Be thorough, but.
Because if you're saying we don't wanna use free cash, fine, like we did last year, do what we did last year. It was, I wouldn't do it again, but it was thorough at least. At least we found every nook and cranny to take it from, and not use the free cash.
Although my suspicion is that last year's budget was more carefully accounted and we may not have those
Those dollars.
dollars. Or I guess I should say this year's budget,
Currently.
the current year's
Yeah.
budget, yes.
I don't know. I wouldn't do it at all. I get it. I signed off on the warrant. I supported every article, I think.
And you're just
And I'm
trying to
just-
get it to be more like this year's budget is this year's budget, next year's budget is next year's budget. Don't monkey with it.
Yes. But
If it makes you feel better, Justin, I will give it another look at the budget, just so that you.
Just to see
Well, I
if
think
there is-
Susan and Frank should too. Yeah.
But I don't know, you have to look at what's actually been spent out of each account as well as have a sense of what's going to
If
be
it's,
spent.
you have to have a sense what's left.
Right, so I'll
Like,
let
if
you
you don't do
know
this.
my sense.
Okay.
Okay.
And I, like, even if I can, it's easy enough to look at what has been spent,
Mhm.
but having a sense of what's going to be spent in a lot of those accounts, I don't know that I have that perspective.
Okay,
Anyway, back to
So
that.
the
Cory.
general consensus is we're gonna order them high to low. And then definitely, there's those 3 articles that will be paid for with the storm damage special article. And potentially, if there's more money in this year's operating budget or other special articles, money will come from there to reduce the amount of free cash that we're spending at the meeting, which is a noble goal. Then we have the planning board solar zoning bylaw, which,
They posted it and set a time for hearing, so I think it's gonna happen.
I did send it out to him, I asked for the information.
Yeah.
Because you thought the hearing was.
yes, just sort of know. And then there's I'm gonna skip the recall for a second, the fire department capital, is that happening or no?
For this?
Mhm.
No.
Okay, so that's not happening. Then there's the recall, which I personally wouldn't do at this special town meeting.
So give me your reasoning for that again.
I just don't think it's right to call special town meeting and, if we're gonna, if we're gonna do it for what we need to do it for to get by, then do that. But, I mean, if we, again, if
Our
we want,
original plan was to have the special town meeting to deal with things like that made the annual town meeting weren't too big.
yeah,
That were substantive changes like the zoning bylaw changes and the bylaw changes and things like this.
yes.
Right.
So the
But
solar
that didn't
zoning,
happen because the
because,
schools hijacked
yeah,
us.
so the schools hijacked us. The bylaw review, personally, I would put on a separate one, just because that is so long to put
Yeah,
on the
I
annual town meeting warrant. I wouldn't do other bylaw changes. I have a number of things that we could put on here if we wanted to, like the second annual town meeting in November, the first Saturday in November. We have the wording on that. If the select board decides that's something we wanna put on, we could do that at any special town meeting. I just wouldn't do it, because it doesn't seem appropriate. People don't like, there's a special town meeting and the select board put on X, Y, or Z that we didn't really need to. And there's, fatigue, and yes, it makes town meeting a little bit longer, but,
So if you're are you suggesting that if we wanna go forward with having a regularly scheduled second town meeting, I'm not even calling it a special town meeting, second town meeting, as we previously discussed in fall, we could choose not to call, but basically put it to people, we're thinking it would be a good idea to have a second scheduled town meeting at the 6-month mark, not so much for emergency financial issues, but to deal with issues of bylaws changes and larger changes to the structure of the town, so that we don't get saddled with an annual town meeting that's so cumbersome, because it's both the budget and all of the changes. Is that how you sort of want that on the annual town meeting to get acceptance from people that they're willing to do it in 2 pieces?
well, so the biannual town meeting, the dark skies bylaw is a general bylaw, the short-term rental bylaw is a general bylaw. The renumbering bylaw as a general bylaw, those are all things that I have, well, not so much for short-term rental and dark skies, but things that we have talked about as maybe being good bylaws. I wouldn't put them on a special town meeting warrant, myself. I'm not gonna, argue this till 9 o'clock
Nope,
at night,
I
but
agree.
I just wouldn't do it.
No, you wouldn't, so you wouldn't put it on this one, is what you're saying,
I wouldn't put it
on any special.
on a special one.
Right.
I
But-
think if we have to do one for something like bylaw, where it's just not feasible at annual,
Mhm.
you have to do it very carefully. And let people know a month or 2 in advance, not, it's just these money items, and then by the way,
Boom.
we're throwing the recall back on it. The first time you're hearing of it is when the warrant's delivered in the mail. I think when we were talking about doing the bylaw review, and hopefully still are talking about doing bylaw review, you take extra care, because everyone has their first Saturday in May blocked off if they care. If you're gonna do other bylaws, I think you should take extra care to,
Advance warning,
Advance warning.
notification, hearings, et cetera.
maybe it's a romantic idea, an idealistic idea, but
I'm not
that's
sure
what
I
I would do.
disagree with you, what I think I was suggesting is that we then go ahead and commit to having on the annual town meeting an article that puts forward to see if we can get the town to agree that we'd have a second scheduled,
Yeah, first
Town
week of
meeting.
February or something like that.
or whichever week we pick. We talked about something in November, I think. This sort of the 6-month mark from May.
Mhm.
That would be a regularly scheduled meeting at which substantive issues before the town, other than the budget, could be considered.
The worries that I have right
Right.
now are something like, a special town meeting shall be held on the first Saturday in November, except if the select board determines that no meeting is necessary. And that's something we talked about, I'm in favor of. Long story short, I wouldn't put it on this one.
Oh, I wasn't suggesting we put it on this one.
Yeah.
I was suggesting it for annual town meeting,
Mhm.
so that we could establish that next November, we'd have the opportunity to put some of these other bylaws on there. Because I do think that people get exhausted by the end of annual town meeting, I know I do. And you can watch the stream of people start to move out, and a lot of times they're moving out before we get to substantive things like the bylaw changes, because they're exhausted.
So, speaking of long meetings.
Yes. So that basically calling the question, do we put the
The
recall on
recall
there?
on this special town meeting.
And I don't really care. I just think that we should, if we don't, we should put on the annual town meeting.
Yeah,
I think it should be,
I'm
annual.
friendly
You
to
get more participation.
yeah, okay, so we'll put on the annual town meeting.
And the reason I don't need the Monterey Fire Company, because we've agreed that the new lease won't start till July 1st, because we're already locked into it, this budget period.
Mhm.
So, we'll
So-
do it in May.
I am gonna put one more thing up there, and you're gonna hate me, and I know it's late, but I think it's important. I do think we should if we put the potential salary range to 85K.
Mhm.
And if one of our reasons for going forward with a TA search is to not repeat the errors of previous boards as we perceive them to be, then since that is a higher salary than the current salary that we're have in place for this fiscal year, it deserves to be on the warrant, and if it means a conversation of that's uncomfortable concerning putting that job out there, then that's what it means, but it is a salary that's higher than the salary that we currently have on there. And it may involve some other associated costs if we choose another person because of other reasons, like vacation that's owed to the existing TA. So we need to be aware of that potential series of costs, and I think even though it's difficult to have that conversation and we maybe would like to avoid it, I'm gonna put out there that I think we should put it.
So, by the time we sign the warrant, and even by the time we have the special town meeting, we wouldn't know how much, if any, money we need.
That's true.
So,
On the other
yeah,
hand,
it's
if
kind
we
of
get
off,
approval for up to 85,000, then we get approval. If we don't end up having to use it, we don't end up having to use it. But we won't have it if we don't get approval, unless we do a reserve funds transfer. We've already been down that discussion. It's a smaller amount, I grant you, right? Because originally we'd been talking about maybe 100 or even more. But the fact that it's a smaller amount, it's still more than what the current fiscal year salary is. So let's put it on there.
I wouldn't, I think
You
it's,
talk about transparency and honesty, and I think.
I think it's beyond clumsy, because
Okay.
the screening isn't potentially gonna be in until just whatever it is, like just a week before, a week and a couple days. So let alone knowing what we need, if anything. So do we stand up at a special town meeting and say, we don't know if we need anything, we might need $5,000, we might need
I
$10,000?
think we say we've posted and advertised for a salary up to 85,000, and we want authorization from the town to allocate that money so that we can in fact offer that to someone, should we hire someone and feel that that's a salary that's appropriate based on their experience. Because that's exactly what we're talking about doing. If we find someone that's willing to take it for 70, then we don't have to pay it, but that would be true no matter what.
So I think what we really do is like, in the first few months, if we negotiate a contract for more money with whoever we negotiate a contract for more money with, we work within our budget. Potentially make a reserve fund transfer to cover vacation, which we discussed before we posted the job. And then, if there's any increases, they happen after, at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Then you can't post the job for 85,000 because you don't have 85,000.
Well, we don't for the first few months, but it's like many jobs, and Mary said it as well, you can say it starts at this for 3 months, and then we bump it to X, Y, or Z, which COLA bumps it to 84.
So it's not a huge
Yeah,
increase
I just
at
wish
that
that,
point.
Susan, if you felt this way, I was willing to post the job at the current rate, and I got the sense from you a couple weeks ago that you were willing to post it for more, knowing that we have the reserve fund.
I am,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I guess I'm having second thoughts because I felt strongly about putting it on there initially because I wanted to be upfront with people about the process. And I still kind of feel that way. So I guess I'm torn and that's what's coming across. And I'm not trying to be difficult, it's just we've kind of tried to be consistent about being upfront and direct with people about our process. And yes, is it legal to do that reserve fund transfer? Yeah, and I think I convinced myself it was okay because it was a relatively small amount. I wasn't okay when it was 100,000, right? Because that was way too much of a discrepancy. But even though it's a small amount, why are we not putting it on
Because so if we knew we had to make a reserve fund transfer for $4,200,
there?
we'd put it on the special town meeting warrant. We have no clue if we're gonna need any money, let
You're
alone.
saying we don't know what the amount
We have
is.
no clue.
Yeah.
So how do you
But we
go
know
up
that
before
we-
town meeting and say,
Because
we have no clue?
Because what you go and say is, we posted the job for a salary up to 85,000, and we want authorization from town to allocate that money, so that should we find a good candidate, and we wish to offer them that salary, we have authorization to do it. And you just ask for the amount that's the difference between the current salary and the allocated top salary. And that's what you do. And you're like, that is straight and above board. You're making sure that should you need to spend that 85,000 and offer it to someone, you have the money to offer it to. I mean, and you can say we don't even know the amount because you can't just say it's that because it's only the remainder of the fiscal year. And you have to do a count, we don't know when they'd be hired and when they'd come on and when yes, that's all true. So maybe we'd be allocating a little bit more money than we actually ended up needing, but at least you get to have the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is, I did it in part thinking, you hire the current salary for the first few months, if we even go that route. And then COLA right off the bat, without any merit raise or any
No, I get
experience
it.
raise,
Right.
is within a stone's throw of the upper end of the salary that we posted. So part of the reason we posted that is because we knew in, 4 months with just COLA,
It was going to be.
it's 84.
Right.
So, I think it's clumsy, I think it's, you don't wanna stand in front of town meeting and say, we don't know if we need this money. We might, we don't really know how much, but we might need it. And so for that reason, I wouldn't put it on the special town meeting warrant, but that's just my 2 cents.
Right?
I wouldn't put it on the special account. It's because it's not a large amount, like you said earlier. If it was a drastic amount, you're talking about like 1% after the COLA. It goes, I don't even know the exact number, it goes to like 84.
It's
Yeah.
not a big amount.
It's not a big number. I think that people want us to manage that kind of thing, but they don't want to get involved in making $1,000 decision.
Fair.
Mhm.
So, that being said, we will continue on, we'll order them high to low, we'll take from the storm damage special article, potentially other articles, and we're waiting on the planning board zoning bylaw, and that will be special town meeting warrant.
On a related topic,
Mhm.
what do we wanna do about the bylaws, the bylaw review?
Well, it's later in the agenda, which I don't know
Right, okay.
what we're up for tonight.
Yeah, and it's not gonna be on the special town meeting, so it isn't so pressing that we get it done,
Yeah.
It just reminded me of it.
it's a tough one to tackle, but it'd be really good. You know, maybe that's the first November town meeting or
Yeah.
something.
But we do need to start thinking about looking at that stuff, so it doesn't end up bumped off again.
TA position, I think everyone got the final profile. It's
Yeah.
posted. Melissa asked if we should post it on the town website too.
I think it should be.
I
Yeah,
think it should be.
Oh, it's officially posted in the?
I didn't know when it was gonna be officially posted.
I thought you
so.
guys had to like approve it tonight.
No, the one that I got was from the website, from Collins Center.
So they put it up.
Um,
I guess we approved the language at the meeting when Michael was here.
yes,
And then they sent us the copy, but I wasn't sure when they were gonna post it.
Yeah.
So what's up?
TA evaluation, so I had on my ongoing things, I wasn't sure where we were at. I exchanged, briefly with Melissa, and rightfully so, there was some confusion about where we left off, which was unfortunate that we didn't resolve it at the time. I sent you all email from Donna just to see what do we do, because we have an evaluation, and as is somewhat typical with evaluations, there's a response. And then there's also a response to the response. So she cited Mass MGL and said when there are disagreements, the personnel file should include all parties' positions, not be excluded. In this instance, the composite evaluations, the individual evaluations, must a response to everyone's evaluations, and your response to Melissa should be in the file. So, that being said, I think it's pretty straightforward, and I think that we should go forward with that unless there's any opposition or questions. I didn't even know, I put this on the agenda before I asked for Donna's advice. It seems very straightforward. It seems like the composite evaluation, each individual evaluations, and anything Melissa wants to respond to them, as well as my response, should just go in the file, and then that's a wrap.
Seems like a done deal.
Okay.
I mean,
The Monterey Schoolhouse.
every word, no matter how long it's
So I think I sent everyone the
Yeah.
email, Melissa
done.
and I have been back and forth with Donna a little bit. She just figuring out what we gotta do. Are there any questions on that? I think it's pretty straightforward, we're just waiting.
Yeah.
She's gonna basically give us the process to fill it,
Yeah.
whatever that may be.
Mhm.
Okay. What is this?
Bylaw Review Committee, so this, I think, should be a discussion of how we wanna tackle it, and one idea would be we schedule some working meetings,
Working
Okay.
meetings with them or we're with us?
working meetings of us, and we tackle it 5 pages at a time, 10 pages at a time or something. That's my first thought, unless anyone else has another idea. It's a very large project to tackle, and
It
they've
is.
really done so much
Yep,
legwork
they
to get
have.
us where we are. I just don't know it intimately enough to know what's going on.
The comments that are on here are from whom?
The Bylaw Review Committee,
Okay.
unless Melissa, you didn't add any comments, did you?
It says like I
I
recommended,
think at one
so is
point,
that David that recommended?
different people looked at it, but that's a good question. I wanna say Donald looked at it at a certain point, but I'm not even sure.
Okay. Do we
I
need
know.
to ask David who the comments are from? Does
Yeah.
anybody, okay. Like I just noticed there's not a ton of them, but it says I, and I'm like, I
don't know, I get overwhelmed thinking about it.
There's Donna and David,
So there's two different commenters?
yeah, like the
Can you,
one,
are they in color there and you can tell?
When this is, I recommended the ZBA be appointed, the blue rep, that's Donna. And the next page. The first one is Donna and the second one's David. We can go over that.
Maybe what we need to do though, now that I'm thinking about it, is not just meet alone, but meet with David, if we can find a time that works for all of the four of us. And then probably tackle it 10 pages at a time, that would be 3 meetings. But we really need to be prepared if we're gonna go that route.
Right.
And show up and have read the 10 pages and do it. And move on to the next 10, the next meeting. And it's like, I don't know when we have time to meet, we haven't been doing joint budget meetings with the finance committee, which we don't necessarily need to do, but we kind of do need to start doing that at some point.
Yes, we
because,
do. And I'm
we
sure
don't
they
wanna
some
have two
opinions.
different budgets.
And it would be good to start them sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we should get them moving.
Well, is your intent to put this on the annual town meeting warrant? Because if it
The
is,
bylaws, no.
No,
okay, then I would say start it after we get past the budget.
budget season.
Yeah,
That, it makes sense to do that. Let's get through budget season, because
Yeah.
if we're talking about November, we have some breathing time. I know you wanna be involved in it, but we still have time
well,
between
just don't
the end of February
count
and
your
May.
wishes, I might still, who knows?
My wish is for you to continue as chairman. I'm putting it on the board right now. The thought of somebody else in the seat is worrisome to me, because I
So-
know I can work with you. I am not in favor of you moving. You're staying if you have to put your bed in this room.
So, in any case,
I went to the second floor of my house.
so in any case, yeah, we'll do it. We might, maybe it makes sense to meet with David once though and keep the momentum going, and maybe that doesn't make sense at all. But I would be really curious to know, I wanna say David told me that he was at 90%. I don't know if he used that number, but that was kind of the number I came up with in my head.
Is that what you were hoping?
And I'm just curious to know like what,
I'm not sure he's given me a number. It does say the document to be a working document and the feedback from the SB is vital. I think they're at the point where they need an outside opinion.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
what they're asking for.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
And that's what they're asking for.
They've looked at it so much.
Right, and
Right.
I think that, once this week is over, I would have some time to actually give it some attention when we're not in budget meetings. And I'm certainly, I'm interested in doing it. I think another way to do it would be for all of us to go through the document and put our own comments on it, so that at a meeting when we come together, we can share our comments with each other.
with 27 pages, just go through the 27 pages.
I don't know, we could even do 10 at a time. I don't think that, I thought your breaking it up idea wasn't terrible. Like, I like the idea. I'm just like, so many meetings, but let's get through budget season before we try to have meetings. You want me to ask him to give us an update of where, I think what they want is feedback.
So I think
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
the
Yeah.
question is for David, should he, it's a working document, what does that mean as we go through it?
It means they don't feel that it's complete.
Yeah.
That's
But I
what it
mean,
means.
it'd be good to know, and maybe we just each need an individual conversation with them to get a little bit of a better sense, but am I supposed to be checking this for accuracy to the old bylaws, or just reading through it and noticing things that I notice? What kind of review are
Yeah.
we looking for?
I think we can, my impression is that we can trust that it's accurate.
Mhm.
I don't think we have to check for accuracy. I think if anything, we need to, probably give an opinion as to whether we think the changes they're recommending, if they're substantive changes, not like
Yeah.
are we okay with them combining the 3 things they combined in whatever, I'm making this up.
Yes.
Right, or do we think it's a good idea or don't we? If we do we like the way they did it? Like,
Yes, okay, and I think what we had discussed before was minimal to no substantive changes in this go round.
right,
And then they were gonna note any, I mean, it's overwhelming for me to even think about.
yeah, it is overwhelming, but there are a lot of things that need to be done, and they did it, and I hate to not capitalize on the word, or wait so long, that they themselves don't even remember the changes they made.
So we'll move along, but maybe after the budget. Town administrator items, Anything? Minutes. Before we get into the regular minutes, I will tackle briefly the review of old executive session minutes,
Yes.
which of course is more complicated than yes or no.
Oh, wait, three
So-
questions have
So
to come
those were
too?
all going back. I looked at them today.
So one thing I'll note is that in Donna's email, she said the 10-4 minutes are still labeled draft.
Right,
I wrote draft amended because I removed the transcript because it was very poorly done and it was a compromise because we were at risk of not being able to approve any minutes because we had a member abstaining. We had me who wrote the minutes and then a transcript and a member who was so a abstaining member, a member who was trying to be reasonable, and a member who wouldn't vote yes unless the transcript was included. So a compromise was to just slap it all together, but we're the board, we can amend the minutes. So my draft amendment was just deleting the transcript.
and the transcript, from my perspective, was virtually unintelligible,
Yeah.
which is why
Well,
I,
you're talking, yes.
it
So-
was really
Something like that,
unintelligible,
some
so I thought it was damaging because you can't even understand what was happening. Better to, was that meeting recorded?
Yes, so
Let
So-
people watch the recording then.
the 10-4, long story short, I wrote draft amended when I sent it to
Right.
Donna and just deleted that because I assumed that a reasonable board might be agreeable to deleting the transcript and calling the approved minutes without that chunk. We can still amend the minutes for the board.
Right.
That being said, how do we move forward? So.
I think we approve them as amended with the transcript out and remove the word draft.
Well, yes, but Donna writes, I thought she was gonna say yes, or release them or no, but forget the first two sentences, because I explained why those exist. She said these all involve personnel matters which can be kept confidential if you reasonably believe that to release them would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. That will depend on how much of these various complaints have already been discussed in open session or otherwise in the public domain. I'm gonna summarize the next few sentences. She expects that certain complaints are out in the public, and then she's less certain about other complaints. If those are not in the public domain, then I recommend redacting references to them. So the question is, can we redact them in a tasteful, appropriate way to keep confidential information that you would reasonably believe would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy? As you may or may not know, for various reasons, including unauthorized leaking, a lot of the information is in the public domain. So maybe you could say it's a moot point, release them unredacted. I still think because it's coming from the board, it would be reasonable to redact in an appropriate way for the reason that she suggested, while still releasing the bulk of the minutes. And if we were to go that route, I would ask for her
To do
Help.
redaction.
in the redaction, because how do you do it in a way that's legal and appropriate, but also achieves the goals, which are also completely legal and
Right.
appropriate, of keeping confidential what would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy.
I agree with your approach. I
So,
think that if we wish to do redaction, we should get council's help on doing
Yeah.
redaction.
yeah,
I agree.
And
so I think it would be really good to be able to release them in a redacted fashion, and as long as it's agreeable to you both, I will proceed by trying to work that with Donna. To make sure that it's legal in both, releasing what is able to be released and also keeping confidential what we don't need to release and wouldn't really be appropriate to. And I don't really know what that would look like, but I was expecting like a yes
Or
or no,
right?
or even a more clear, like what's redacted, what's not, but if she goes through them, she can do it in a way that she recommends is legal while still being. Anyway, so it's a little
Okay.
messy, unfortunately.
Well, so essentially, bottom line, you have already removed the transcript
As in a draft version, yeah.
in a draft version. So we would need to remove the transcript, remove draft amended, because they're just gonna be what they're gonna be. Ask council for help in redacting the appropriate parts, and then approve release of the redacted amended minutes.
Yeah, so we've already approved all the minutes, it would be, yeah, approving release, I think you laid it out perfectly. At this meeting, what I would hope we could do is vote on a motion to approve my amendment to the October 4th, 2021 executive session minutes. Which is simply deleting the transcript and keeping the rest of the minutes intact. And also vote that I will move forward in working with Donna to redact the minutes in an appropriate legal way for public release in a redacted version.
I will second your motion and agree to it. My only question is that if there is a recording of this, normally we would release the recording when we release the minutes, but if we're redacting the minutes, we can't release the recording.
Yes, well,
Unless someone
Yeah.
redacts the video record, which I don't think is a
that
good
should-
idea.
I mean, that'd be-
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And
We're not compelled to also.
what
To do
Bill
the
said,
recording?
To release the recording,
Yep.
post it on the YouTube. We do that because we wanna be transparent.
but we don't
And
have.
so if it was a hairy situation, we could ask on it, maybe if we get a public records request, we'll be required to redact them, but that is an expensive, costly project potentially. So all that being said, what we can do is just not do it because we're not compelled to by law off the bat. And then if we get a public records request or we get a summons or.
But we can
document
store
request.
it, I guess, if you get a public request, so we could provide someone with a recording.
Yeah, well, it's on my email, my town email,
Mhm.
so.
And I think that the only question would be whether it's possible to get a better transcript together.
Well, I think the minutes that I wrote, I think are pretty good.
I'm not
Yeah.
questioning your minutes, I'm questioning the transcript.
Transcripts, I like to
Right.
follow
It was completely unintelligible.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the idea of a transcript, by the way.
Right,
It
there
just has to
isn't.
be done properly.
It has to be a good transcript that's actually a good representation of what was said and intelligible.
So-
Alright,
I made
I second your motion.
a motion and Susan seconded it. Is there any other discussion? I'm gonna restate the motion.
Okay,
So the motion was to approve the amendment to the October 4th, 2021 executive session minutes. And the amendment is simply deleting the transcript and keeping everything else intact. And then the second part of the motion is that I will work with Donna to prepare redacted versions of all three sets of minutes. 10/4/21, 11/4/21?
11/4/21 and
And 11/17/21 with Donna prepare redacted versions for approval to be released to the public. And there's a second, we'll vote,
yeah, yes.
Yes,
and yes, so that's all done. Those minutes have been approved in an updated version, and I'll work with Donna on a redaction that's appropriate for public release. Which I will bring back to the board before it actually is released. You'll get a second chance to approve the redaction. Minutes. 110, I don't think
The
I'll
only
say.
ones that are there, because I'm waiting for the ones from you.
Well, I don't know if 111, you have Susan.
I have Susan and Frank.
I have minimal changes.
Those two.
So if you could work on 110, we'll get the 111 and then we'll.
So the two sets of changes on here are you and me and
No,
Frank?
well, sorry, I don't have 11.
I didn't do the
I
one
don't have
ten.
111 from them. You had sent me 118. She still has to look at them.
Okay,
Sorry.
so you have 111 for me, 118
I
for
don't have
Susan.
111 from you, unless you just sent.
I did.
Okay. I have 118 from Susan.
Alright, next week's meeting, just approving minutes. I'm just stepping out for a second, we'll look.
Go for it. So so it's everyone on 110. Who's gray, who's,
It's just you two.
it's just us two. And, so I have to look up who's which.
Gray is Frank.
Oh, it's just Frank.
It's
and
just Frank and you.
Oh, this is where the fire department, so he wasn't
Yeah.
there. Yeah,
I was thinking about the planning board with the next one, or the. I sent you the 23rd late this afternoon.
If you send them after 5, I don't
Yeah,
usually.
they're somewhere around
Isn't
there. I
it
gotta
ready to
wait.
come in here?
Just space. Looks fine to me.
Yeah,
You good with that?
yeah, I'm good with it. I make a motion to accept the.
Minutes of 110.
110, yes.
24. I'll second the motion
Okay.
to accept the minutes of 110-24 as amended.
Okay, yes.
Yes,
I'm gonna initial yours, or you're gonna initial?
it
mine?
doesn't matter. I didn't make any changes at all.
I didn't either, but that usually Justin has this.
Yeah, I know, so it's just because often we do. Here you go. Pardon?
Got one off the list.
I know, right?
11 is the planning board.
And somehow it's just dropped off my radar, I don't know how. I didn't download, yeah, I didn't download
Marty was
it
having a hard time.
immediately, pardon?
She was taking notes. during that.
Mystery.
It was fine.
Are we done?
I think so.
Oh.
We approved those meetings.
Can I suggest we put the status of the employee handbook on?
Yeah, we're gonna do it in
Somewhere.
December. Have it done by December, but you didn't say what year. I watched the video.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of frustrated that I realized we started this in July of 2022, and
Well,
it's still
I'll put it on next week.
done.
that's good.
I'll put it on next week.
We came to closure on a lot of stuff over the year and a half that I've been on the board, but
There's
how
a couple
long it
things.
takes to get some things done is so frustrating.
Yeah, and I know I sometimes get overwhelmed by large things like the employee handbook and the bylaw review, and I'm not good at tackling them, so I appreciate you bringing it up. And,
We get the smaller ones done, which is great, we changed a lot of policies, but we need to bring some of those things to the finish line.
all right, motion to adjourn,
Second motion.
and we'll vote,
Yes.
and yes, meeting adjourned at 8:24 PM.
And I will reach out to